Assalamu alaikum, Sanbonani, and welcome back to The People's Voice on Salam Media, your home of humanitarian journalism. In our next segment, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Alon Mizrahi, who is an ex-Israeli and a feisty anti-Zionist. If you look at his X profile, you'll see him say the global South will win. So here to talk to us more about why humanity must stand together against Zio-Imperialism, let's bring into studio Alon Mizrahi.
Hi, Shabnam. Happy to be with you. Thanks for inviting me.
You are most welcome. So, Alon, obviously, the most burning question people will ask is, what do you mean ex-Israeli and ex-Zionist? And what do you mean global South will win? Take us through your thoughts.
Well, I'm a big believer in living and abandoning systems and ideologies that betray you. So if you're part of I'm a bit of a rebel in this regard. I'm going to talk specifically about Israel. But if you're part of any organization, and a country is an organization for this matter, it's just a political organization, and it behaves in a way that fundamentally betrays your belief system and doesn't look like it's going to change and reform, just leave it. And this is what I did with Israel. I don't believe in that you're born into a certain ideological system, be it a religion, nationality, whatever, gender, whatever. It's not fate. There has to be an element of choice in it. There has to be dignity in it. And if the system that you're born into doesn't allow you to have dignity, don't stay there. And this is what I did. When Israel began this genocide, I was an anti-Zionist before the genocide. This is not new to me. But when the genocide began, the Gaza Holocaust, as I call it, began, and I knew where this was going, it became too much for me, and I realized I have to just leave Israel. I had to leave Israel, and this is what I did. So I'm calling myself an ex-Israeli, which is a bit funny, but I actually mean it. I chose to discontinue my association with this country because of the abhorrent things that it's doing.
Right. That's a very powerful start to the conversation. You also believe that the global South will win. Why is that?
Because we have, and I'm saying it we because I'm an Arab Jew. I'm not an Ashkenazi Jew. So inside the context of Zionism and Judaism, I speak for and see myself as part of the oppressed part of Judaism, basically. I'm not going to get into this because this is a whole different topic. But Arab Jews and Mizrahi Jews, Jews from Muslim countries, Jews from Arab countries, brown Jews and black Jews have suffered terribly because of Zionism. In Zionism, and many of them have joined the oppression, which I won't deny, but still, my consciousness, my political consciousness, is that of the global South, and why I think it's going to win. It has very pragmatic explanation and also a philosophical explanation or a political explanation. First, you can see that the global South today is better organized. It works better. It has China on its side, and China is a global South country. It's a global South empire. It's a native indigenous empire that we haven't seen in centuries, and it's on the rise, and it knows what it's doing. And Russia is in the global South, and it's fighting hard to preserve its status and standing, its independence, and Iran as well. The tide of anti-colonial sentiment is so strong and powerful that the very artificial, very thin layer of control and management that the West still has over our consciousness, our economy, our money system, it is fading rapidly. And we can see this really embodied, this decline of the West embodied in the Trump administration, and how ridiculous it is, how vulgar and brutal and cruel it is, but also how ridiculous it is. They are not making the West is not getting stronger in any sense. It is getting more anxious, more confused. Western people, I think that there's now a slight majority in the West for decolonization and anti-colonial sentiment and political stance. So this big human movement of Western colonialism that we experienced as a species over the last 500 years or so, it is fading and declining rapidly. It is losing momentum, and we can see now with the rise of China and the re-emergence of Russia as a major international player, that the global south found its voice and found its step and found its political purpose, while the West is losing it. And
Mm-hmm.
it is getting richer. The global south is getting richer. It's not only poor countries. China is not a poor country anymore. And Russia is no longer a poor, destitute, broken country. So, yeah, I see a lot of hope. And there's also an element of justice. You cannot have a system that's based on exploitation, based on sadism, based on racial hierarchy, and believe that it's going to last forever. Things don't work like this. Humans eventually revert to justice-oriented solutions. This is why socialism is so much wiser and so much pragmatic, so much more pragmatic than capitalism. Because you cannot build a system around injustice. It can't hold. People won't want it. And you can see
Certainly, an
some.
idea whose time has come. I'm going to, if you're okay with this, Alon, because our time is so limited, I could hear you speak forever. But I want to ask you a question on this first image that we're going to put up on screen, and it's just been tweeted by Francesca Albini Sadiq. If you can help me get Alon 2 up on screen, please. So, Alon, this is a tweet by Francesca, and you can see it's gathering momentum there. Breaking: a new UN report finds that Israel's assault on Gaza, with the destruction of healthcare, education, infrastructure, and even the banking system that you talked about just now, has erased 69 years of human development, marking the worst economic collapse ever recorded. This is not war, it is genocide. Why do you think it's so hard for people to understand that this is genocide, and whether that is Israelis or it's Zionists in the US or other parts of the world? Is it the programming? Is it the constant assault through mainstream media? Or is it because they benefit from the violence of Zio-Imperialism and therefore they will not see what is happening in Palestine, Sudan, or Congo to be genocide?
I deny the claim that the people don't see it. It's not people. We can see a very clear divide in about and around the Gaza Holocaust. This is not an actual conflict or disagreement between people. You can see a very clear divide of people versus establishments. This is the people in every Western country where people are polled. There is a majority that opposes and denounces what Israel is doing. There isn't a single country except Israel where the people see what Israel is doing and say, this is okay, we identify with it. We are seeing a conflict between the people, and this is all the people of humanity. This is not just people of this country or that country or the global south or the West. The conflict is between the people and Western elites, Western corporations and Western elites. This is the fight that we are having. And this is, I'm connecting this to my previous answer. This is why I'm confident that the people are going to win. And the global south represents the people of humanity. I think that China now represents the people of the West better than the US government. It has more concern for the actual well-being, for the future, for the values, for the normalcy of American society or British society more than the American or British governments. So This is a fight of the people, and this is the time to be a radical. This is the time to be, if you want to call yourself a communist or Leninist, or be a radical. This is the time to be a radical and call things by the true name. This is a class struggle. It has elements, major elements of racial supremacy, of white supremacy, of Jewish supremacy. But it is like almost every other major conflict that we have, it is a class struggle. So it is not so much the people who believe this and versus people who believe that. It's people versus Western corporations and establishments and academic institutions. I mean, the disappointment in what the West stands for, and in what the conversation the West is able to have. This disappointment runs very, very deep. This is not just the banking system or the arms industry that you expect to be cynical. This is Harvard, and this is Oxford, and this is medical associations. This is across the board a civilizational failure, complete and total failure. We haven't seen one source of principled resistance, objection to what Israel is doing in the entire West. This is something that we need to grapple with. But what this means, I mean, in any other country and in any other context, you would see, and we have seen throughout history, some resistance. There were some powers who were reactionary, who were sadistic, who were evil. But there was always some resistance, people who offered a different solution, people who said enough. But we are not seeing this in the West. The entire establishment class in the West is corrupted beyond any ability to correct and reform. And this is why I believe, and I think maybe I'm a bit lonely in this position now, but I hope it becomes more popular. I never criticize the New York Times. There are many people who do that and say, oh, look what the New York Times is saying. Look what the Washington Post is saying. Look what this Board of Education is saying. I never do that because I don't see it as my role to reform them and correct them. When an institution is fundamentally evil, not mistaken, not late to a revolution, but inherently evil, supporting the mass murder of children and babies, we need to break it and replace it. We don't need to bother with trying to reform it. You cannot reform evil.
So Alon, you said so much that I resonate with, including our struggles being a class struggle. So it's essentially the 99% of us and the 1% of them. The power of the people will always be greater than people in power. So I really appreciate what you bring to this conversation. But I do want to talk about the Global South and South Africa in particular. Just before our interview, we started talking about South Africa's role and your appreciation for the case of the ICJ, but also the people themselves, the majority of our country standing with Palestine and the oppressed anywhere. And our next guest will be talking about some pushback on that position in South Africa online. But you may also be aware that Glencore, which is a corporation based in other countries, but also in South Africa, that is sending our coal to fuel the genocide in Palestine. Unabated. Government is doing absolutely nothing about that. And secondly, we have South Africans who are going to join the IOF and commit genocide, and there's been no accountability about that yet. Does that change your perception about South Africa, or do you still see it as governments and corporations versus the people?
Well, no country is a monolith, right? No country, and we know that this is my view. I'm the struggle for justice is never ending. I don't believe that there's a state. I'm not a Marxist in this regard. There's no, the proletarian is not going to win and that's going to be it. We are always going to have to criticize power, monitor power, qualify power. I mean, there's no like end state where good triumphs over evil. Evil is an integral part of human existence. So, but not to be too philosophical, I mean, the power Western establishments have and Western institutions, the financial power that they have, the economic power that they have, is still enormous because of centuries of very bad norms and practices and exploitation and hierarchy. I mean, and slavery and I mean, we can talk about this forever. So I would not believe for a minute that South Africa, with the high esteem that I have for this country and the role it has been playing in opposing Israel's genocide, and this is a very lonely place to take for a country. Going out openly against American hegemony, against white hegemony, against Western imperialism, it is a very lonely and dangerous path for a country to take, because what we're seeing on the surface, the kind of resistance, the threats that they are making against judges, against institutions, against individual people, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The nasty struggle that they are waging against people who are trying to correct all these norms. For instance, Francesca Albanese herself is being banned from the banking system, basically, that the West controls. She lives in Europe. She's a European citizen, but because of the how the system is built, she cannot have a bank account in Italy, her country of origin.
Well, Alon, Naledi Pandor, South Africa's former international relations minister, has also had her US visa withdrawn, and there are moves to sanction South African politicians who've had the spine to stand up for Palestine the way Palestine stood up for us. But certainly we're looking at a very complex global web of espionage, of intimidation, of blackmail, yes. And Epstein, the Epstein files, a very controversial subject, not only in the US, but around the world. And in the last 2 or 3 minutes before your closing message, I want to look at this Substack. Sadiq, if you can bring it up on screen, or perhaps I can. This is an article that you wrote on your Substack very recently, and I'm glad to have come across it on your X. And it says, Epstein was strategically trafficking leaders, VIPs, and dignitaries for himself and his Zionist bosses. To that aim, vulnerable girls and boys were merely used as props. Highlight for us the most important message from this must-read article.
My point is we need to decolonize our own gaze and our own consciousness, because we are much more colonized than we appreciate. And we see relationships. We see the world, basically. We have been contaminated by approaches that always prioritize the power relations and the hierarchies that Western hegemony and white supremacy wants us to have. So I was offering, and I am offering, a different view of the Epstein scandal. And I'm saying that this is not about the exploitation and the destruction of young and vulnerable people. I'm not denying this part. What I'm saying is that we are seeing in the Epstein scandal really a replication of power relations that I'm talking about, that we are opposing in anti-colonialism, in feminism. We are seeing not mainly the minors being trafficked, but the strong, white, successful men that we are being indoctrinated all our lives, especially as brown and black people, as women, to admire. They are put on a pedestal. They represent everything that's good in humanity. They are entrepreneurial. They are strong. They have character. They have morality. They are leaders. They are natural-born leaders. And we are seeing these people, this group of people, because Epstein was basically the Pope Everyone was talking to him. Everyone was revealing their entire life secret to him. And we are seeing this class of people that's destroying the lives of the rest of the planet through the colonial system, being used, being trafficked by this one entrepreneur of trafficking power and trafficking powerful men. And I think that this is, if you want an anti-colonial lesson from the Epstein affair, this is it. We need to see how contemptible, how weak, how unreliable this class of people is. This white, successful, strong men that destroy our lives, and they are the tyrants and exploiters of our societies, of the planet, of native societies. And we can see how despicable and weak and pathetic they are. And this is the lesson from the Epstein. And this is a whole different view. This is not, because when you say, oh, the poor children and those evil men, you are replicating you are keeping the power structure in place. You are not challenging it. But if you're saying these are the weak people, these are the people, and they are not victims, they self-victimize against everything they tell us. There's a double system here because they present themselves as powerful, but in fact they are very weak. They have no character, they have no morality, they have no
Alon, we seem to have lost your sound there. Sadiq, I'm not sure what's happened. But we are closing at the end of the interview now. And Alon, if you want to try and just put your mic on again, it will give you a 60-second closing message. Let's try and unmute your mic. See if that works. And then we'll move on to our next guest, Aisha Bacchus, talking about countering Islamophobia. Can you hear us, Alon? I think we can hear you now.
I don't know how.
So Alon, that's the gremlins. Whenever we're having a powerful conversation, that happens, right? So your closing message on why, within the context of the fact that there are elements in Israeli society that are turning against it and refusing to serve in the IOF, what is your message to the world about why we must stand against Zio-Imperialism? 60 seconds.
Zio-Imperialism is the cutting edge, or maybe the last powerful root of Western white imperialism. And it combines a class element, it combines a race element, and it really embodies injustice in all its known forms, basically. And it is a big test for humanity. And my call to everyone who's listening, to everyone who ever reads me on any platform or hears me, be a radical, be strong, be brave, be clear, because they are trying to confuse us all the time and say, no, this is really about this. It's about anti-Semitism. It's about how you are not so good in such a way. And I'm saying, no, you are excellent. Be strong, be steadfast, be radical. This is the time. We can't wait for another generation or 5 generations for the anti-colonial struggle to succeed. This is now the time.
Powerful closing message from Alon Mizrahi. Be strong, be steadfast, and be radical. Thank you, Alon Mizrahi. We look forward to welcoming you again on the People's Voice with Salam Media.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Shabnam. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Powerful conversation there with Alon Mizrahi. We'll certainly be talking to him again. And in our third segment, we'll be talking to Aisha Bacchus from Mothers for Gaza and the Palestine Solidarity Committee on countering Islamophobia and the example of the Kifness right here in South Africa. And you can watch this conversation on Salam Media's YouTube. Watch out for the link going live.